Assalamu alaikum guys, this will be a 5-part series where we will be explaining 5 different recitations of the Quran where Avery, also known as God Logic, tries to undermine the Islamic tradition. Before we begin, let's make it clear to everyone that we believe that the Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran in different ways. This is well known from the beginning of Islam and is massively transmitted within the hadiths that this was the case. And it's the most historically plausible conclusion, even to an outsider, as even Surah Al-Fatiha contains differences within the different recitations we have preserved. It would be nonsensical to say the Prophet ﷺ only allowed to recite it one way. What makes more sense is that he taught and allowed multiple different ways depending on the dialect or meanings being taught. Many of times these differences will be dialectical, and this is the vast majority of the time, while in the minority of the time, the difference will be in meaning. However, this difference in meaning enhances the meaning of the Quran without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having to say 2 different sentences. Instead, there is a minute changing of a word ever so slightly. An example I can give is Malik and Malik within Surah Al-Fatiha. One means king, while the other means owner. These aren't the same meaning. However, they complement each other well and don't contradict each other. This enhances our understanding of Allah Azza wa Jal in a concise manner without having to repeat the verse. So as long as the different recitations don't contradict and are massively transmitted from the Prophet ﷺ, teaching it to his companions, then it's a valid reading. Now, knowing this, let's now begin the series of refutations, beginning with chapter 37, verse 12.
7 verse 12. Now, I got my Arabic speakers here so they can break this down. Now, DLC, do you mind reading this? If you could see this, can you read this for me in the Hafs version?
Yep, the Hafs version says بل عجبت ويسخرون. So the word that is in question is عجبت, which means you are amazed or surprised.
You are amazed. Now, who's the speaker, Jai, in this context? In chapter 37, verse 12, who's the one speaking?
This is Allah speaking to Muhammad.
So Allah speaking to Muhammad, and he says, you were surprised while they mocked, or you were amazed while they mocked. So Allah speaking to Muhammad. But when we scroll down here and we see all these different, readings of the Quran here, they're mostly the same. But we get down to Al-Kasai and Al-Hamza. We get here, what does it say here, DLC?
It says بل عجبت ويسخرون.
Now tell us what the difference is.
What's happening here is Allah speaking again, but he changes the pronoun. He says بل عجبت ويسخرون. عجبت, that's the word difference. If you remember in the Hafs, it was عجبت. Now what's the difference here? It says I was amazed.
Wow.
So Allah is amazed now. Before it was Muhammad who was amazed.
So here's the big difference. We got Allah, who is the speaker. He's the speaker in both versions of the Quran. He's the speaker. And yet we have Allah saying in one version, he says, you were surprised while they mocked. While in the other one here, he says, I was surprised while they mocked. So the Muslims can't say, oh, well, this dialects and, they all carry the same meaning. No, the meaning literally, it changes the entire context. Was it Muhammad who was surprised, or was it Allah who was surprised? Now, if you want to say both, then, by all means, Allahu Alam, say both. Both Allah and Muhammad were surprised, but you can't say that this isn't a difference. And that doesn't change the meaning.
Well, of course the meanings change. However, this is no issue as both were recited by the Prophet ﷺ. I'll begin every response with an explanation of these different recitations, followed by an example from the Bible showing Christians are the ones who have the real problem, while us Muslims don't. So for every qira'ah that changes the meaning, someone has to ask themselves, do they contradict? And does it enhance the meaning of the text? In this case, this isn't a contradiction, even though ignorant enemies of Islam have suggested so. If I say God knows what will happen tomorrow, and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ knows what will happen tomorrow by prophetic knowledge, that isn't a contradiction. A contradiction here in this verse would be something like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ experienced ajab, and he didn't experience ajab at the same time in the same moment. And yes, it does enhance the meaning, as we're shown that not only was the Prophet ﷺ amazed, but that Allah Azza wa Jal took great note of what they did as well by doing the action of ajab. This shows us the gravity of the people's sin in rejecting the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Islam. Finally, there needs to be explained what does it mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to perform the action of ajab. So we can refer back to the same example I brought between Allah's knowledge and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can know something and the Prophet can know something. However, it wouldn't be in the same way, in the same sense. There would be deficiencies involved with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's actions, there's no deficiencies involved. So even though they could both know the future, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ doesn't have complete knowledge of the future, and his knowledge goes from not knowing something to then possessing knowledge of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses knowledge of the future comprehensively and doesn't go through the process of not knowing then attaining knowledge. So in the same way, when the Prophet ﷺ experienced the ajab, this may involve him being amazed and having knowledge that he didn't know before. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, however, the deficiencies involved in ajab, such as having deficient knowledge, won't occur within the meaning of the usage of the term. This is why we have scholars like Baghawi and At-Tabari essentially saying this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taking great notice over something, either something bad or something good. And there is some hadiths presented within the tafsir to show this action is performed by Allah Azza wa Jal outside of this qira'ah. So to make it clear, we've explained how this doesn't contradict, how this verse enhances the meaning, showing the gravity of what the disbelievers are doing. And we show how it isn't problematic for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to perform the action of ajab. Now to bring up a biblical counterpart to show that Christians and Jews have the same idea of God performing actions, but not in the same way as created beings. What we have here is 2 Samuel 24 verse 1. It says, "Again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, go number Israel and Judah." So God incited David against Israel. But if you look in 1 Chronicles chapter 21 verse 1, another book in the Bible, it says Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel. So who incited David against Israel? Was it God or was it Satan? Well, obviously you're going to say it's both in order to reconcile this. And is the way that God incited David the same way that Satan incited David? Obviously not. God's actions are perfect, while Satan's actions aren't perfect. No created being's actions are perfect except for God's. So this is a clear counterpart where Christians admit to actions being performed both by created beings and God in similar situations. However, they don't say it's a contradiction. This example also shows how God can do an action and someone else do an action, and yet God doesn't necessarily have the deficiencies of doing the action, unlike a created being. If you'd like to see more videos like this and support the channel, my GoFundMe and Patreon links will be down below. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.